and welcome to this. And this is my thoughts on the 2025 Wrestling Observer newsletter Hall of Fame ballot, and actually my first ever piece of wrestling audio. I have wanted to do this for a long time, but I've never really had too much to say that isn't already said in other podcasts. There's so many great wrestling podcasts out there. I wouldn't be saying anything different. I'd just be reiterating what other people are saying and talking about, so that's why I've never done it. But I am very passionate about the Hall of Fame, so I thought I would join in with the Hall of Fame audio this year. I'm quite behind on my listening this year. I did get to listen to the episode Bix did with John Pollock. It was fantastic. Everyone go check it out if you haven't already. I'm behind on the Voices of Wrestling. I will catch up on that this week, but everyone go check those out. Joe Gagney was on discussing the modern US and Canada side of the ballot, and Ethan Tyler was on discussing the Japanese side of the ballot, so check those out if you haven't already. So full disclosure, I actually don't have a ballot myself, despite my best efforts I suppose, but it is something I'm still very passionate about, so I did want to jump on and just discuss the ballot really. I won't be touching on everyone on the ballot. There's some people I just don't really have too many strong feelings of, and there's just some people I just don't think should be in at all, so I won't really throw them under the bus, but I will touch on candidates that I do feel strongly about or think that have a chance of getting in this year. So we will start off with the historical performers. So in this section you have 6 maximum votes. So on the ballot for the historical performers this year are Ole Anderson, Afa and Sika the Wild Samoans, Bullet Bob Armstrong, Tully Blanchard and Arn Anderson with JJ Dillon, the British Bulldogs, Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith, June Byers, Wild Bull Curry, the Junkyard Dog, Cowboy Bob Ellis, Pampiro Firpo, Black Gordon and Great Goliath, the Mongolian Stumper, Archie Goldie, the Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart, Sputnik Monroe, Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch, the Iron Sheik, Sweet Daddy Siki, Ricky Steamboat and Jay Youngblood, Mad Dog and Butcher Vachon, and Kerry, Kevin and David Von Erich as a trio. So as I said, I won't be touching on everyone here, but I will touch on anyone that I feel I have really more strong thoughts on. So the first person on this side of the ballot was Ole Anderson. Ole Anderson to me is like a threshold. If your career was better than Ole Anderson, you should be in the Hall of Fame. If your career isn't as good as Ole Anderson, you probably shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. I have heard Case Lowe actually say this about Chris Hero when it comes to the in-ring based candidates, that if you're better than Chris Hero in the ring, you should be in the Hall of Fame. If you aren't as good as Chris Hero in the ring, you shouldn't be. That's how I feel about Ole Anderson as a pro wrestling career. He was a big star, obviously. He was a great wrestler. I don't think people really appreciate it, but he was so good. He was a draw. He was a booker, but I'm not sure if that gets taken into account of because of where he is on the ballot. But if you do, he was a great booker for a time before he became one of the worst bookers in the world. He actually booked Mid-Atlantic and Georgia simultaneously, which is just insane. I don't know how he did it, especially if you look at the schedules both of those territories were running at the time. In the early 80s, I think it was 81 or 82, he was doing both. He took over Mid-Atlantic from George Scott, and that's, to be honest, it probably is what led to his downfall as a booker. You can tell if you watch Georgia 1983, 1984, he's just burnt out and has no ideas. But he did have one idea that really worked, and that's of course the Road Warriors, which I think has to add to his case that it is a positive historical influence, which is part of the criteria for the Hall of Fame. He did create the Road Warriors, and as much as he would try later on to recreate it with, it feels like a dozen teams, he was never able to do it again, but he did create them originally. So if you look at the other criteria, which is your drawing power and your in-ring work, I think Ole has enough to get in. I really do. As a draw, Ole and Gene were a big time draw in Georgia and Mid-Atlantic. Ole on his own as well. He challenged for the NWA World Title, challenged Dory Funk Jr., he challenged Ric Flair. There's actually a handheld online of one of his NWA World Title matches with Ric Flair. It's a strap match from Buffalo, which I recommend everyone check out. So I do think Ole he isn't Hulk Hogan, but Ole could draw, and he could talk his ass off. He really is one of the best, most unheralded promos of all time. I feel like he's almost forgotten because of the Four Horsemen. People think Ric Flair, one of the greatest promos of all time. Arn Anderson, one of the greatest promos of all time. Tully Blanchard, probably the most unlikable heel of all time with great promos. But if you watch early Horsemen, early in mid-86, Ole is cutting the promos for the group, and I think he's just been forgotten in terms of being a great promo. In ring, I think he's very underrated in that regard as well. I just think he's very, very good at working as a heel. He's not working to have necessarily a great, what we would now consider a great work rate style of match, but he's great at working as a heel, and if you watch the crowds, Ole could get incredible heat during his matches. And his work, if you watch his team with Arn, unfortunately there's not a whole lot of Ole and Gene, but if you watch him with Arn, they have some matches with the Rock and Roll Express that are just fantastic, and they are just a perfect counterpoint for the Rock and Roll Express and that style of Southern tag team wrestling, which we always think of the Midnights and the Rock and Roll popularizing, cutting the ring off, getting heat on, Ricky Morton, hot tag, double heat sometimes, but doing it with Ole and Arn, two men of their size, their stature, it was just a perfect mesh, and I love their matches. I would really recommend anyone checks out their steel cage tag match from Starrcade 86, and also check out their match, I think it's from June or July 1986. It's on the 605 show, a 30-minute time limit draw. Really, really, really great stuff. And Ole also has a singles match with Ricky Morton. I'm not sure, it might be on this channel. I can't remember if I uploaded it or not. If not, someone will have it online. It's an example of a great Ole Anderson singles performance in the ring. So yeah, I really just feel strongly that Ole Anderson's career in totality should get him into the Hall of Fame. It's hard for me to imagine, well, it's not hard for me to imagine because it exists, but it's hard to fathom that there's a wrestling Hall of Fame that doesn't have Ole Anderson in it. I just think his career speaks for itself, and he should he should be in the Hall of Fame. I know that maybe not the most liked person in the world, hard to get on with, which would have affected people that he worked with, his contemporaries, voting for him. But now that he's unfortunately gone, I really hope people can look at his career for what it was and see that this guy is very significant in the history of wrestling and was a great performer and deserves his place in the Hall of Fame. Next on the ballot then is the Wild Samoans, Alpha and Sika. I really don't have a lot to say about the Wild Samoans. I don't think they have much of a case, really. A good team, but I think that they might do quite well, depending on how the voters think of the bloodline, how that storyline propelled WWE, and this significance of them being, what did Roman call them, the elders. If that really resonates with a lot of the voters. I can see them thinking they're incredibly historically significant and maybe doing well. Personally, I don't think they're quite Hall of Famers, but we'll see. And that's all I really have to say about the Wilson ones. Next is Bullet Bob Armstrong, who I could say a lot about, but I won't. The reason for that is with Bullet Bob, I'm such a big fan of Continental and Smoky Mountain. I think my heart rules my head with Bullet Bob. He is someone that I would need to really study more, how he did at the gate. And yeah, I don't think I'm properly equipped to talk about Bullet Bob without my heart ruling my head. I would love him to get in, but I would need to do more research to let my brain come to the same conclusion as my heart in that one. But I will say he is definitely historically significant if you think about his role in the Georgia War in 1974, I want to say, 73, 74. Yeah, I think that he's definitely historically significant enough. But other than that, it is very much just me loving Bob Armstrong. So I hope he gets in, but I'm not sure he will. Okay, so next is one of the more controversial acts on the ballot. Tully Blanchard and Aaron Anderson with JJ Dillon. And the reason why this is so controversial is that Tully and Aaron with JJ were together as a team managed by JJ for about a year before Tully and Aaron packed up and went to the WWF. You can't induct them based on that. JJ has a much better case just on his own in the non-wrestler category as being, you know, a great manager, really, really underrated. A booker. He worked in the Maritimes. He did all Japan tours. I think he has a much stronger case on his own, as do Tully and Aaron, because then you can include their run in New York, where they wrestled for another year, and were, in 1989, probably the best tag team in the world. There is definitely an influence case to be made for them. I think a lot of heel tag teams want to be like Tully and Aaron. FTR, obviously the big one, even though they are a lot spottier, even though they might not admit it, than Tully and Aaron. I wish Tully had more influence. I wish there was more heels that wanted to be like Tully Blanchard and just never be cheered, just be the most dislikable person. But Tully and Aaron as a team, I absolutely love them. One of my favourite tag teams of all time. But does 2 years get you into the Hall of Fame? Or not even a year if it's with JJ as it is on the ballot. So can that get you into the Hall of Fame? I don't know. As if it was my personal Hall of Fame, they're in the first ballot with Bullet Bob. But I don't see how they can get in, as much as I love them. Next on the ballot is the British Bulldogs, Dynamite Kid and Davey Boy Smith. I really don't have too much to say on them that hasn't been said elsewhere. I wouldn't be adding anything new really. I don't have overly strong thoughts on them. After that is June Byers. I really need to research June Byers more. I do have the biography on her, but I haven't read it yet. I feel like I would vote for her, just from what I know. She's on the borderline, or yeah, she's around the borderline. But with more research, read the biography, I could see myself thinking yes on June Byers. But as of right now, I can't say that. I don't know. Next up, Wild Bull Curry. Earlier I said about how I can't fathom that there's a wrestling Hall of Fame without Ole Anderson. That's exactly how I feel about Wild Bull Curry. I can't believe he wasn't in the inaugural class in 1996, which is very strange because Danny McShane went in on the inaugural class, and Danny McShane is credited with shaping the style of Texas wrestling. But so did Bull Curry, and I just find it very strange that he wasn't put in, or hasn't been put to the historical panel at this point. I just can't see how he isn't in, to be honest. I really hope that the voters do their research on Bull Curry. What he did in creating, he almost created hardcore style of wrestling, the Texas style of wrestling, which is, snug and tough. There is a match online. It was from NWA Classics, Bruce Tharpe. It was Bull Curry against Johnny Valentine, and it's such a great match. Bull's probably in his 40s during the match, but you can see really how good he and Johnny Valentine both were. There is a spreadsheet that I have access to. I wish I could remember who put it together and I could credit them, but unfortunately I can't right now. And it's going over Bull Curry as a draw, and I think there's enough there, along with his historical influence, to get him into the Hall of Fame. I'm just looking at the spreadsheet now. I've pulled it up. Some that are sticking out to me is a world title match against Pat O'Connor, drawing 8,025 people in Chicago. Teaming with the Sheik of Arabe, I butchered that, against Antonino Rocca and Miguel Perez in Madison Square Garden, drawing 20,793 people. That's from 1958, so it would have been the old Madison Square Garden. 8,182 people in Detroit, teaming with Killer Carl Cox against Lloyd Dayton and Bobo Brazil. 9,000 people in Toronto, teaming with Tiger Jeet Singh against Mark Lewin and Whipper Billy Watson. 10,000 people against Bobo Brazil in Detroit. 10,000 people teaming with Tex McKenzie against Pampiro Firpo and the Sheik in Detroit. 12,000 for the same match. 10,000 again for the same match. 7,000 people against the Sheik in Detroit. 12,000 people against the Sheik in Detroit. 9,000 people against the Sheik in Detroit. As you can tell, he's working against the Sheik and Bobo Brazil in Detroit, but they're not going to draw with just anybody. And Bull Curry was a draw. He is historically significant. From what we have on video of him, which isn't a lot, very good wrestler. He's just someone that I think should absolutely be in the Hall of Fame, and really one of the stronger candidates on the ballot this year. Next up on the ballot is Junkyard Dog. I would direct everyone towards the audio that David Bixens's band did with John Pollock. They touch on the Junkyard Dog and they say pretty much everything there is that needs to be said on the matter. Great audio, and Junkyard Dog should be in the Hall of Fame, and going by how well he did last year, it does look like he will finally get in this year. The next candidate I'm going to touch on in the modern era is, the historical era. Oh, that's crazy to think about. Is the Hart Foundation. Now, I don't have too much to say about it other than I don't see it. Brett, obviously, first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt. But the Hart Foundation as a tag team, they were a good tag team, obviously, in an era where the WWF had a lot of good tag teams, not a lot of great tag teams, and the Hart Foundation are very much more good than great. They were the last tag team to be positioned as draws in the WWF. In 1987, when they were the tag team champions, that was the last time the tag titles were really put in drawing position. So they do have that going in their favour, but it's not a Hall of Very Good, it's a Hall of Fame, and Brett's in. Jim Neidhart, I'm a fan of. I love the Anvil, but for the Hall of Fame, I don't see the Hart Foundation really getting in. Sputnik Monroe. Once again, I would like to direct everyone towards David Bixens's band and John Pollock's audio, where they touch on Sputnik Monroe and their thoughts on him. They don't say anything that I disagree with, and I can't really add too much to it. Very historically significant, not just as a wrestler, but as a person. So, I do believe Sputnik Monroe should be in. And the last candidates I'd like to touch on from the historical era is Kevin, Kerry and David Von Erich as a trio. And again, I would direct everyone towards David Bixens's band's Substack, where he touches on their candidacy, and he comes to the conclusion, which I wholeheartedly agree with. Kerry has a case on his own much stronger than as a trio, with Kerry, Kevin, and David as a trio, you're really only looking at a year or so of them teaming up. They don't team up as much as you may think. It's very much positioned that way in documentaries and the Iron Claw film, where they were this big trio that teamed all the time and they worked with the Freebirds forever, but it really wasn't like that. Kerry on his own is a much stronger candidate, and it's probably how it should be on the ballot. So listen, I love the Von Erichs, but as a trio, I wouldn't be able to pull the trigger on them. I really shouldn't have worded it like that. I really wouldn't be able to vote for the Von Erichs as much as I do adore them as a trio. But I think Kerry definitely has the strongest case on his own. So that's really all my thoughts on the historical portion of the ballot. If I had a vote myself, I would go with, bear in mind you're allowed to vote for up to 6 in this category, so I would go for Ole Anderson, Wild Bill Curry, the Junkyard Dog, and Sputnik Monroe. Yeah, I think that's it. On the fence about June Byers, but with more research I could see myself saying yes, but for now I would be voting for those 4 candidates. So next up is modern performers in US and Canada, and this is again up to 6 votes. So on the ballot this year we have Jay and Mark Briscoe, Adam Copeland, Superstar Bill Dundee, FTR, Bill Goldberg, Samoa Joe, the Hardy Boys, Becky Lynch, Drew McIntyre, Mercedes Moné, Jon Moxley, Kevin Nash and Scott Hall, Randy Orton, CM Punk, Cody Rhodes, Seth Rollins, Sabu, Trish Stratus, and the Steiner Brothers. Now this is the section that I will have the most thoughts on. I've lived through just about everyone's entire career, and I've seen, well, even if I didn't live through all of it, I've seen just about all of it, with the exception of Bill Dundee, because we just don't have that footage. I have watched a lot of Bill Dundee. I love Bill Dundee, but with everyone else I have watched their entire career, if not in real time. For a couple of people I've went back and seen it all, so unfortunately for everyone listening, you will have to listen to the dulcet tones of my Northern Irish accent for quite a bit during this section. So first up is Jay and Mark Briscoe, the Briscoe brothers. In my opinion, the greatest working tag team of all time. I've seen just about their entire, well, I can't say their entire career, I didn't follow them in every indie they worked, but I've seen them going back to 2001. I see CCW and ECWA. I've seen the vast majority of their Ring of Honor matches. I've seen pretty much all their Noah matches that made tape, New Japan, and that one TNA match they had. They're the greatest working tag team of all time. There is not a doubt in my mind. Name another tag team that was great for as long as the Briscoe brothers were. I do not think you can. Bix did make the point that maybe tag teams should be, as far as longevity goes, should be considered in dog years, because tag teams generally have shorter runs than single stars. If that were to become the case, then the Briscoes are even more undeniable than they already are. I just can't put into words how great I think this tag team was. Jay's death is probably the wrestling death that hit me the hardest. It devastated me. I love this team. I don't even think it's a case of my heart ruling my head. I think that they are absolute Hall of Famers. When Jay passed, I sent Dave over some information on the first time that Dave had ever mentioned them in The Observer. It was in 2001, and it was their CCW match in the first Best of the Best tournament. And I hadn't watched that match in at least a decade, maybe more, at the time of Jay's passing, so I went back and watched it after telling Dave about that was the first time he'd ever mentioned them, and I was blown away. It holds up unbelievably well for a match that at this point is almost 25 years old, and it's not really discussed enough that these two are both wrestling prodigies. They just got it right away. There's no way that match should have been at that level for the age they were in 2001. And not just their age, but also their experience level. It is ridiculously good. You will not see anyone in 2025 with the same experience level having a match at that level. It is so good. I recommend everyone go out and find it however you can. And just from there, what they would go on to do in Ring of Honor and Jersey All Pro and CZW, they're just the greatest tag team I've ever seen. And with all due respect to the Midnights and the Rock and Roll, even to their contemporaries like the Young Bucks, the Machine Guns, the Kings of Wrestling, no one can touch the Briscoes, and they, for me, are one of the strongest candidates on the entire ballot. And I have to say, when it comes to selling pornography and training wrestlers, Van Hammer is a first ballot Hall of Famer. So next up we have Edge, Adam Copeland, or Cope as he likes to be known. I feel that with every passing year, Edge's candidacy just gets worse and worse, and this year's been no exception. I just can't see it. A good wrestler. Dave is probably the world's biggest Adam Copeland fan. There was a point in time, not even that long ago, maybe around a decade ago, slightly less, where Edge was the wrestler with the most 4-star plus matches on pay-per-view, behind only Kurt Angle. So Dave was a fan of his work. I liked his work. He's a good wrestler. But is he a Hall of Fame level wrestler? No. Is he a Hall of Fame level draw? No. People usually say that he carried SmackDown, and I get that to a certain extent, but if you look at it, so he was part of the SmackDown 6 era, where, you know, very good part of the show, great part of the show, wasn't in a drawing position really. Then he goes to Raw, and then he goes back to SmackDown in 2007. That was just after Backlash, so it was around April, and then he gets injured in the summer. I think it was July, and he's out until November. He comes back at Survivor Series in November, and he carries SmackDown from November until August, and then he's out again, and he comes back at Survivor Series again then in 2008, and then he's on SmackDown from November through to June or July when he gets injured again. So in totality, he does carry SmackDown, but it's really not for an extended period of time, or even a long time when you add it up. I just don't see it personally. And as far as positive historical influence, I would say he has a negative influence more than anything, unfortunately. As far as people taking crazy bumps off of ladders, through tables, really damaging their bodies, especially as often as Edge was doing it, and I know that that's not his fault. He was put in that position and he did make the most of it. Those matches, especially for the time, are fantastic, but I find it as a negative influence, especially for my personal taste, considering I cannot stand ladder matches anymore. I don't see it at all with Edge, really. And as a kid and a young teen, I loved Edge, but this is the Hall of Fame, and again, when I say I can't fathom a Hall of Fame without Ole Anderson and Bull Curry in it, how could Edge be in? So it's a no for me, but I know that there are people that do really like Edge. But just as well, his AEW run has not helped his candidacy whatsoever. For me, he's been a bit of a negative. I've enjoyed a couple of his matches, and his WWE return was the same. I just I think the comebacks hurt him more than anything, really. But that's enough on Cope. So next up is superstar Bill Dundee. One of my favourites. If it's the Neil McNerlin Hall of Fame, he's in it. Right there with Bullet Bob. Observer Hall of Fame. I don't know. I love him, but is he a Hall of Famer? I think he would do better in historical, and I do believe he will be in historical next year. So we'll see how he does there. I feel that there's people better equipped to talk about Bill Dundee's candidacy than me. All I know is I love him. But is he a Hall of Famer? I would leave that to people who really know Memphis inside out. As much as Memphis as I've watched, someone like Chris Zellner or Bix, they could comment on that more. But for me, I couldn't vote for him. But again, in my personal Hall of Fame, he's right there. FTR's next. I very strongly feel that candidates should not be voted in the midst of their big run, and that's what FTR is still currently on. I haven't seen a dip. I don't think they're way past their peak. They're still as good as ever. So it's not so much a no for me. It's just I don't feel right voting for people in the midst of their prime, really. So as great as they are, one of my favourite tag teams, I would leave it until either they're done or you can tell that they're past the peak of their big run. Bill Goldberg. This is one I really struggle with, and Goldberg's an interesting candidate because I don't think there's a candidate, maybe ever, on the Hall of Fame ballot, not just this year, that has been so negatively affected, not by their own doing, but by booking. And it's not just in one promotion. The two major promotions that he worked for, both completely dropped the ball with him. WCW after Starrcade 98, he was still strong in 1999 when he was around. I feel like he was quite in and out in 1999. He was injured and he was filming Universal Soldier, but when he's there, the crowd's so hot for him. Unfortunately, the rest of the product is so bad that he can't really make a difference. He carried them through 98. He stopped the rot for a year, but no one could stop Kevin Nash's booking from rotting that company. And then Russo, I mean, come on. So, and they turned him heel, and it's so bad. But then he gets another chance. He gets his run with the WWE, with the wrestling genius Vince McMahon. Yeah, right. Second weekend, they put a wig on him, and that's it. He's been slotted. That this isn't someone that you take fully seriously. He's gonna do the Gaga just like everyone else. In the WWE, he doesn't feel special at all. I was a kid during this time. I was so excited watching WrestleMania 19, seeing the hype video. Goldberg's coming, and then we got Raw on Friday nights. So I was still 7 at the time, so I wasn't online. I wasn't reading Raw spoilers. So that Friday, watching Raw, I could not believe when he came out and speared Rock. I thought, this is it. Goldberg is going to be just unbelievable. He's in the WWE now. He's going to work with The Rock. He's going to beat Triple H. It's going to be amazing. Well, those things did happen, but it definitely wasn't amazing. He beats Rock, but as much as everyone loves Hollywood Rock, he didn't get heat, which defeats the purpose of him being a heel. People found him too entertaining. They liked him. If they booed him, it was just going along with the show. So heel Rock, as entertaining as it was, it just didn't really work. And Goldberg beats him. Rock is meant to come back for a rematch, and he doesn't. He hasn't seen again for another year. And then Goldberg has a feud with Jericho, has some nice squashes on Raw with 3 Minute Warning and Rodney Mack, Lance Storm, Christian. It is fun, and it's building up to the Elimination Chamber, where he's going to challenge for the world title. And in that match, for the first time, he really feels like Goldberg. and then Triple H wins. And for me, even as a kid, that was it. I was excited when he won the belt a month later, but it felt like it was a month late. He'd already lost. The magic was gone again. And he holds the title for 3 months. And it just really feels like he never did anything. Again, not his fault. It was the booking. Raw at the time, Brian Gowertz. It's as bad as it gets. It really is. He wins the belt and he's just continually feuding with Triple H and Evolution. Then he loses it in a random 3-way with Triple H and Kane, and it's a pay-per-view that wasn't even televised here in Northern Ireland. It's the only one. I was devastated at the time. I couldn't see it, and then I watched Raw on the Friday and I find out Evolution, I have all the belts, and Goldberg just got beat again. And then it just feels like the run's over. I know he's there until WrestleMania 20, but it just feels like it's done. He has the match with Brock. We all know how that went. And then he's done. His contract expires. They negotiate for a few months after for him to come back. Never materializes, and he disappears for over a decade, really. I always remember there was talks of him coming to TNA. They even teased it on Impact in 2011, but that didn't happen, thankfully. But he does show up again in the WWE in 2016. And this run is everything that his 2003-2004 run should have been. Such a ballsy decision by the WWE to have him squash Brock at Survivor Series. Just an amazing moment, amazing to be able to watch it live. And then they follow it up with, first he beats Kevin Owens for the Universal title, which I know a lot of fans weren't happy with, but it did lead to Brock then challenging Goldberg in the rematch, and they completely make up for their debacle at WrestleMania 20. Their match at WrestleMania, 33, I think, is so good, so fun, such a great big stadium match. If Goldberg retired right there, I think people would have a lot better of an opinion on him. I think as the run went on, he kept coming back and beating people's favourites. He squashes Dolph Ziggler. He squashes The Fiend for the Universal title. I know a lot of people were upset with that, and a lot of people ended up with a bad taste in their mouth with Goldberg. Is he a Hall of Famer for the Observer Hall of Fame? I lean towards yes. The booking, there's just nothing he can do about that. But I think that his height it's enough to get him through. He hit a height that very few wrestlers have ever hit. For a time in 98, he was on par and maybe even bigger than Steve Austin. Very short time, but it happened. And you have to think, everything he had to deal with the politics and everything in WCW, just it being a mess of a company at the time. He was able to overcome that, and he got that company another year maybe of life. He really did save the company. Unfortunately, there was too many forces that were pulling it down that even he couldn't overcome it. I'm a yes on Goldberg. I can see why people say no. If someone said no, I wouldn't argue it too much. But I think that Bill Goldberg is a Hall of Famer. Next we have Samoa Joe. Personally, one of my favourite wrestlers of all time. But is he a Hall of Famer? I think he is. Samoa Joe pretty much built Ring of Honor and the Ring of Honor World title. He isn't there from the very start. His debut is at Glory by Honor in 2002. So it's maybe 6-7 months into the promotion. And he debuts with an amazing match with Low-Ki. And from there, you can feel he is organically getting over. And he ends up dethroning Xavier for the ROH title in February or March. I think it was March 2003. From there, he takes that belt and he makes it a world heavyweight title. It is probably the number 2, as far as how it feels, vibes, as the kids say. It was probably the number 2 belt in the world for a time when Joe was champion, only behind the GHC heavyweight title held by Kenta Kobashi. Joe built that company, that belt, and made it mean something. You had to see Samoa Joe. You had to see his defences as it went on. Who is going to beat Samoa Joe? Is this the show it happens? And I think that helped ROH with not only at the gate but also with DVD sales. And a lot of people would credit Joe versus Punk 2 as saving the company, just because the buzz around that match. It got 5 stars in the Observer, the DVD sales, and how ROH pushed on from it. It propelled the company, and 2004 is a rough time for Ring of Honor, and Joe carried them through. He is as good of a world champion as it gets. Very much like Goldberg, his booking in other places hurts him. But Joe is in ring as good as anyone. Joe's peak, I think, is the greatest peak of any wrestler ever. And maybe that sounds crazy, but Samoa Joe in 2004, 5 especially, 06, 07, even into 08, he is something else. TNA really takes a toll on Joe, it seems, with his motivation levels. Again, he is booked so poorly in that title run. He's made to look weak. He clearly loses motivation, and his work does suffer for the next year or two after that. But really, he's never the same again in TNA. They never give him the ball again. His work is up and down. He never dogs it completely, but you can tell like he's not giving it what he was in TNA in 05 to 08, say. I remember 2011, I think, the Bound for Glory series. At one point he had like negative points, and I was thinking, oh, Joe's gonna get pushed now. Like the old, the fake out, like this guy's out, and then he'll rise and he'll be the one that wins the Bound for Glory series and challenge Kurt Angle for the world title, going back to their biggest ever match. But no, they just booked him that way because. So again, the booking of Joe definitely hurts him, but if you take in his historical influence with Ring of Honor, I hold that class of wrestler that that came up in the early to mid 2000s in such high regard for shaping the future of wrestling when it looked bleak for a while. People like Joe, Danielson, AJ Styles, the Briscoes, CM Punk, they just don't get the credit for how much they helped wrestling and shape its future. And Joe was really at the forefront of that in 2004, 2005. He obviously, it's a bit of a meme now, but he got TNA's biggest ever pay-per-view. Him and Kurt Angle, 60,000 buys. Joe's a Hall of Famer. He just is. That's not even getting into his WWE run, which was as good as you could expect, really. And then his AEW run, where he got a world title run. As I record this, he is going to challenge Hangman Page again for the world title on pay-per-view in a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks. So even now, he's 46, I want to say, and he's still challenging for world titles because he is that good. He's that believable. His promos are that good. He's that reliable. He's a complete professional. And in my mind, he's one of the greatest professional wrestlers of all time. Samoa Joe is a Hall of Famer. Next, we have an interesting one. The Hardy Boys. This is one I struggle with, but I can see an argument either way for the Hardys. So, the Hardys obviously revolutionised the ladder match, what we now know as the ladder match. Again, going back to what I said about age, I think it's generally a net negative. I think it's hurt a lot of people's careers. I think it's made ladder matches worse. I much preferred the Shawn Michaels, Razor Ramon, Tracy Smothers, Chris Candido, Benoit, Jeff Jarrett style of ladder match. Rock and Triple H even, the one good Triple H match almost. But the Hardys are revolutionary. They were the next iteration almost of a Rock and Roll Express rockers style of team, but for the 90s, the late 90s, early 2000s. They were incredibly popular, and that shows when you see how they can draw in the indies. They've never been able to draw in TNA. I know Matt Hardy just recently came on Twitter and said he and Jeff against the Dudleys drew the house for Bound for Glory. Whatever. I don't think so. But on the indies, or Omega, like when they would reboot Omega in the mid-10s, the Hardys can draw. They drew in Northeast Wrestling. They drew in Ring of Honor. They do really well. They just could never overcome the TNA stink, as it were. I could see the Hardys going in. Personally, I'm a big fan of Jeff. I thought his work was really good for a while. Say from 2007, 06-07 through 2012, 2013 maybe. Yeah, I'm a fan. Matt's really annoying, but he really was a good wrestler. If you watch his work, mid-2000s, like 05, 06, 07, probably through to 08, 09, his ECW title reign, he was a really good wrestler. I would probably slightly lean towards yes for the Hardys. I'm not super passionate about them getting in, but I would be happy for them getting in just for what they do for independent wrestling. They really are a positive in that regard, and I could see them getting into the Hall of Fame. So next on the ballot we have Becky Lynch. This will be my hot take for the audio. I do not know what people see when they think that Becky Lynch is a Hall of Famer. Yes, she broke through and became a big star in the WWE for a very short time, the biggest star in the company, which is definitely something. But it's an era where nothing matters, and she got popular, and she main evented WrestleMania, but she main evented WrestleMania as Ronda Rousey's opponent, one of her opponents. Ronda Rousey is why that main event happened, and almost immediately, when Ronda's gone, Becky's on the back burner. And when I say that, what I mean is, they obviously seen her as a star still with Ronda gone, but the division was never put in that light again. It just went back down where Becky was a star, and the division itself didn't really matter. I've always felt that Vince liked Becky as a star a lot more than Triple H. Triple H has never really seemed to fully think that about Becky. Maybe that's just me. I'm not sure, but yeah, I just feel that her big case is that she main evented WrestleMania, first women's match ever to main event WrestleMania. But it was going to happen with or without Becky. It was going to be Charlotte. It would have happened with Ronda anyway. It's obviously a more regular thing now, as the division did get more stars, and the work was fantastic for a while there in WWE, but I just don't see it. And as far as her work goes, in her young career, very, very good. Prodigy, like, if you watch her early work in Shimmer with Daisy Hayes, you can see it's there, the talent, the charisma, she has it. Then she leaves wrestling, obviously, in, 2006, I want to say. Comes back in 2013 with NXT, and she's great. She is very, very good in the ring. Since she got to the main roster, it's been very hit or miss for me. To be honest, mostly miss. I think she has a great, funky chemistry with Charlotte, probably because they're potatoing each other in some cases, but I thought they had really good matches. And I thought she had a very good match with Bianca at WrestleMania, whatever year that was. But largely since then, I've not been a fan of her work at all, really. As far as her promos and her character work, I've always found it embarrassing, to be honest. I can't get into it at all. The glasses, the costumes, I've always found it goofy. Her promos are like someone in a school playground trying to be Conor McGregor. It's very forced to me. Anytime she's on screen with Seth Rollins, it's death, not just to watch but also in the ratings. I feel like I'm really burying Becky here. I like Becky, but as a Hall of Famer, I couldn't see it at all. And I know I said I don't like to really consider people in the midst of their big run. With Becky, I feel like we've seen the majority of her big run, and there may not be much left of it. If there is any left of it, she is what she is now on Raw, it seems. So that is Becky Lynch's candidacy in my eyes. Next is Drew McIntyre, who I do think is still in the midst of his big run. So I won't really touch on Drew. All I will say is he will have a lot of work to do in the next however many years to be considered. And then we have Mercedes Moné, definitely in the midst of her big run. Best women's wrestler in the history of North America. As good as any women's wrestler ever, just about. If she keeps that up, then I can absolutely see it. But she is in the midst of her big run, so I don't want to speak too soon on Mercedes Moné. John Moxley, same thing. He is in the midst of his big run. 2-time Wrestling Observer Wrestler of the Year. I think he is the only person eligible that isn't in the Hall of Fame who's won Wrestler of the Year. I know Ospreay won it last year, but he isn't on the ballot yet. But I think everyone else that has won it, other than Moxley, is in the Hall of Fame. So that's definitely something to think about. Again, in the midst of his big run, so we'll see how he progresses and continues on being pretty much the biggest star in AEW and really carrying the company as the heel champion for the last year. I'd like to see how that pans out in the voters this year. Kevin Nash and Scott Hall are next up. I don't have a lot to say. Loved them as a kid. Love watching them now. As a Hall of Fame tag team, there really isn't much there. They're probably the coolest people on the ballot, and maybe the best businessmen. But as a Hall of Fame tag team, as much as I like them, I just can't see it. Yes, next we have everyone's favourite Hall of Fame candidate, Randy Orton. Earlier I talked about how Dave is one of the biggest Edge fans in the world. I am almost 100% certain he is, or at least was, the biggest Randy Orton fan in the world. Especially since the passing of Larry Matosic, Dave has definitely taken the crown as Randy Orton's biggest fan. Randy Orton has great longevity. He's worked for the biggest wrestling company in the world for main roster, 23, almost 24 years now. Great for his bank account. But besides that, there is literally zero case for Randy Orton to be in the Observer Hall of Fame. Anytime he was given the ball to really run with, it did horrendously. In the ring, a very good wrestler. I enjoy, well, a very good he's an excellent TV wrestler, or was at least. His pay-per-view matches usually hit or miss. Some great ones in there, but a lot of underwhelming ones, and one that was two pros working at a different level. But he's more of a wrestler that other wrestlers love and appreciate, because it's a night off working under Randy. You're never hurt. Everything's smooth. Like when people would rave about Kane, when he chokeslams you don't even feel it. Great worker. And I like Kane's work, but that's more like Randy Orton. His fans of his in-ring work are more people in the business than fans. his work is good, but is it Hall of Fame good? I mean, he isn't Bryan Danielson. So, as a draw, no. In ring, no. Historical significance, maybe if people sitting in chin locks for 15 minutes becomes the biggest draw in wrestling, yes, but as of right now, no. And I just don't see a case for Randy Orton in the Observer Hall of Fame, really. Next up, CM Punk. This is a divisive candidate. Some people think he's a surefire Hall of Famer, others don't for various reasons. So the biggest negative I've heard on Punk is that people thought that he really tried to hurt AEW, and I get that. A funny story, I went to All In 2023, and before it I attended a live Observer Live with Dave and Brian. At that show I met Ethan Tyler from various Hall of Fame audios. Now I'm sure you've seen him on The Observer or on The Voices of Wrestling. Great guy, can learn a lot from him. Check out Ethan wherever you can. But I met him there, and we got talking, probably sat with him 2 hours, just shooting the breeze. And we actually ended up talking about the Hall of Fame. And I said to him about Punk, because I was very high on Punk as a Hall of Fame candidate. And he said, at that point, he is a no, because he feels that there's a chance he could destroy AEW. Fast forward 3-4 hours, and CM Punk is choking out Jack Perry backstage at the biggest show in AEW history. So I can see it. Some of the other things that went on with Punk leading up to his return to AEW in 2023, obviously Brawl Out is the biggest black mark on the company, which took them well over a year to recover from, probably closer to 2 years. But does that define CM Punk? I don't think it does. I think that CM Punk's positive historical influence outweighs that. Probably because AEW has recovered. If I was doing this audio on the 31st of October 2023, I might have a different opinion. I think that Punk's historical influence is so important to the modern landscape of professional wrestling. This is a guy who was very much considered indie-rific in the early 2000s. He wore the basketball shorts. He wrestled in IWA Mid-South in front of, at times, a few dozen people. But he broke through, and there's just an intangible with CM Punk. The first time I ever seen him was in TNA on the Wrestling Channel, and immediately I was drawn to him. I don't know why. Maybe it was the Pepsi tattoo, but there's something about Punk that I loved. And then the first ever Ring of Honor match I saw was CM Punk against Raven, maybe a few weeks after I first seen him in TNA, and he was just my favourite. He and AJ Styles were just my new favourite wrestlers at this new horizons I'm getting on the Wrestling Channel. I love CM Punk. And then he gets signed to WWE, and at the time when he was in developmental and early on the main roster, a lot of negative reports from agents, and people thought he simulated great matches, which Punk ended up playing into by using the GTS as his finish, which is very funny, to be honest. His success in WWE was just unprecedented. No one could have expected the guy from IWA Mid-South and Ring of Honor to reach the heights he did. And it's not that he got the push, it's that he pushed through. They give him pushes to a certain level, like 2008, 2009. 2009's excellent work, by the way. His 9-10 Straight Edge Society stuff is so good. But 2011, he just says, I'm making myself the biggest star in this company. He may not have surpassed Cena, but he became a big deal. And you can see the connection he has with fans. There is negatives to Punk, there's no doubt. But I still think he is a Hall of Famer. And like I said about Samoa Joe, he really helped save Ring of Honor in a very difficult time. He was a draw on the independent level, and then in WWE he was a draw. Never the biggest draw, but he was a draw. He takes his hiatus from wrestling and comes back to AEW, and he is the biggest draw in the company, by far. He goes back to WWE, and he's a big draw. Still is today. And he's still delivering in the ring also. You can see he can't do it every week. We've seen what happened in AEW when he was pretty active, but he can still turn it on when he needs to. A great wrestler. He knows how to build a match. He knows psychology as well as just about anyone today. One of the best promos ever. Probably top 5, maybe 5 to 10 top promos of all time. I think there's just too much in Punk's favour. I think that he is absolutely a Hall of Famer. Next up we have the current WWE champion, Cody Rhodes. You heard how unsure I was in my voice there. I haven't watched WWE in so long, but yes, I am correct, he is the champion. Again, in the midst of his biggest run, obviously, but I will say with Cody, he has so much positive historical influence, and he is such a big star, big draw. He ushered in this, the boom period in WWE, 2022, 2023, which Triple H is doing his best to flush away with his booking. He is in the midst of his run, but I won't say too much more on it, but Cody's a Hall of Famer. It's undeniable. Next we have Seth Rollins, again, in the midst of his biggest run, but all I will say on that is, come on. Like, really, Seth Rollins, come on. So next is Sabu, an interesting candidate. Very much never like a huge star, but as far as on the tape trading community, his influence, how he drew on the indies, people had to see Sabu. This is maybe like the first underground phenomenon. People had to see him. They heard about him through magazines and their friends, and had to get the tapes, and they had to get out to indie shows and see this guy. And I don't think there was anyone left disappointed when they first seen Sabu. I know as a kid getting ECW tapes, we got them through, I can't remember the name of the company now, but they were widely distributed in this part of the world. Delta, that's what it was called. We were able to get them in stores, and I would eat them up. I would get as many as I could, largely to see Sabu. He's an interesting candidate. I would lean towards yes for Sabu. What he was able to do for the independent scene, and how big of a star he became without any national backing. I think he finished second or third in Wrestler of the Year in the Observer Awards, 94. He built ECW, basically. He is one of the pillars, if you will, of ECW, and building that promotion. What is that company without Sabu? 1994, start of 95. It's very different. Sabu was a big part in defining that this is what this company is. Yes, we have a traditional world champion in Shane Douglas, but we also have this revolutionary, nothing like you've ever seen before, madman. And I think that's a huge part of the story of ECW, where they did have a bit of everything to the extreme. That is, extreme isn't necessarily hardcore wrestling. I just think Sabu did enough to get into the Hall of Fame. He is historically significant. He is a draw on the independent level. And drawing is very much, you have to contextualize it. And if you contextualize where Sabu worked, when he worked, he's a draw. And in the ring, very unique. His psychology is excellent. If you talk about David Bixenspan interviewed Sabu years ago for Fighting Spirit, and he talked about how he would do his boring mat wrestling to get the fans bored, so then when he did his high spots, he'd get a bigger reaction, and he would intentionally botch some moves on purpose. Not every move he botched, of course, was on purpose, but it fits the character. It wouldn't make sense if Sabu was as smooth as Ricochet, for example. The work's there. From 1993 through, say, 90, even like 99, he has a really good match with Just Incredible on pay-per-view. He has a good match with Taz that year on pay-per-view. And then he has a renaissance in TNA and then WWE in 05, 06. I think I've talked myself into Sabu being a definite yes. I would vote for Sabu. I think he's a Hall of Famer. Next on the ballot is Trish Stratus. I don't have too much to say. I think people can get a little bit mean when talking about Trish Stratus on the ballot. I think it seems to be the same people that just vote for her every year, and it's enough to keep her on. She was obviously an influence to a lot of women coming up in the business, as was Lita. So she definitely got people interested in wrestling and becoming wrestlers, a lot of women. So that is definitely, a historical positive. But is she a Hall of Famer? No. She did retire young as well. She was 29, 30, I think, when she retired. Maybe 31, but very young. So that doesn't help her. She was a good wrestler, historically significant. Not a Hall of Famer, but plenty nice people. And lastly, for the modern era candidates is the Steiner Brothers. One of my favourite tag teams of all time. Great wrestlers. But are they Hall of Famers? I really don't know. I'm speechless. I just don't know what to say about the Steiner Brothers. In ring, are they good enough? I think so. Were they draws? To a degree. The work falls off quite fast. It seems almost overnight. They just became kind of bad as a team. I just don't know. Did they have positive influence? Well, we've seen American Alpha are very much influenced by them. We now have Braun Breaker, who looks like he's going to be a big star, as long as the big nose doesn't get in the way. I don't know. I just really don't know about the Steiner Brothers. My personal Hall of Fame, absolutely. Observer Hall of Fame. We'll have to see what the voters decide. I'm very much unsure about the Steiner Brothers, but I do really love their work, and for a time, I would say 1990, 91, the best tag team in the world. Okay, so next we have Japan, and in this category you can vote for up to 3 candidates. This will be the last one I dive kind of deep into. The others I'll touch on, but this will be the last one I get a bit deeper on. So the candidates this year are Satoshi Kojima and Hiroyoshi Tenzan, Yoshiaki Fujiwara, Hayabusa, Masaki Mochizuki, Antonio Inoki and Seiji Sakaguchi, Zack Sabre Jr., Meiko Satomura, Io Sky, Tiger Jeet Singh, Yoshihiro Takayama, and Manami Toyota and Toshio Yamada. I'm very cognizant that this is starting to go long, and I don't want to subject people to listening to my accent for that long, so I'm not going to go too deep on everyone here, but there's a few candidates I really want to touch on. So we'll start at the top. Satoshi Kojima and Hiroyoshi Tenzan. Very, very good tag team. Early 2000s. They were excellent. And obviously Kojima goes to All Japan, and their singles, they feud. It ends up with Kojima being the Triple Crown and IWGP Heavyweight Champion simultaneously. They have some pretty well-known matches. They have the match that went 59 minutes, 55 seconds, something like that. But as a team, they were excellent for 2000, 2001. Probably the best tag team in the world. It was either them or Ultimo Guerrero and Rey Bucanero at the time. Then they teamed up later on during the the New Japan boom period again in the mid to late 10s, but they were never really focused on. I'm not sure if they would have better candidacies as a team or as singles, especially Kojima. As a team, I'm going no. I just don't think the longevity's there, as much as I am a fan of their work, both singles and as a team. Big fan of their work, but again, the longevity just isn't there enough for me to say that that is a Hall of Fame tag team. But again, maybe if we do think of tag teams in dog years, then maybe they would be. But as things stand right now, I would say no for Kojima and Tenzan. A great tag team though. Next is Yoshiaki Fujiwara. Now this is a candidate that I see getting trailed through the mud a bit. People think that it just isn't there. Good wrestler, very good wrestler, nothing else. His influence, the style died out, the work shoot style. I think that his biggest thing is that he has trained so many great wrestlers and so many Hall of Fame wrestlers. I actually sent Dave an email last year about Fujiwara, because I know Dave, when talking about the Hall of Fame, usually kind of glosses over him, and he thinks, it's not a Hall of Very Good, it's a Hall of Fame. But in the email to Dave, I said to him, he trained multiple Hall of Famers, Akira Maeda, Satoru Sayama, Nobuhiko Takada, Jushin Liger, Masahiro Chono, Shinya Hashimoto, Keiji Muto. He obviously trained other wrestlers who aren't in the Hall of Fame, like Akira Nogami and Yoji Anjo, others. But besides Diablo Velasco and Stu Hart, he would have trained the most Hall of Fame wrestlers. Combine that with his in-ring work, his longevity. Not that, he's been a great wrestler for like the last 20 years, but he was a very good wrestler for a long time. I think Fujiwara should be in the Hall of Fame. I think it's there. And I think he's very overlooked. I think a lot of people should consider his work as a trainer when voting on the Japan category this year, and if he doesn't get in for the following years, that is really something important. So I think his positive historical influence is there. And as I said to Dave in the email last year, he created PWFG around the Tokyo Dome. His students were influenced and went on to create Pancreas. And Takada went on to create Pride, and Pride has a place in the Hall of Fame with Sakuraba getting in, and it would play a big part in Takada. I think Takada was already in, but you can't tell the story of Takada without Pride. I just think Fujiwara should be in. I think that his influence is enough, and I think he's very overlooked as a trainer. I have to say, while I'm doing this, I have a newfound respect for Joe Lanza and Alan Farrell doing their solo audios. This is exhausting. I do not know how they do it, so a newfound respect for them. Hats off to both of them. Great work doing it so often. This will probably be my last audio for at least a year. So next on the ballot we have Hayabusa. Another interesting candidate. Very important to people in the tape trading scene, or even people slightly younger like myself. I wasn't a tape trader, but when I was getting online early to mid 2000s, Hayabusa is one of the first names that I discover, and I think a lot of people's the same when it comes to Japanese wrestling. It's like you learn about Liger and Muta because of WCW, but when then you get online, you learn about the Pillars, you learn about Hayabusa. That seems to be the case for everyone. And Chono for WCW as well. And they're the Japanese wrestlers until you start branching out and really watching more. So there's definitely an influence case. A lot of wrestlers today cite him as an influence, and getting them into Japanese wrestling, getting them into FMW. It's a short career. I think he debuts in 91, maybe 92, but I think it's 91. Trained in FMW. He becomes Hayabusa in 94. So when he's just himself as Eiji Izaki, there's no case. He's an undercard FMW wrestler. Dave seen him live against Luther and thought he was very, very good. Give the match a great rating. But he doesn't really do much. But then he debuts as Hayabusa in the Super J Cup in '94. I don't know if a lot of people know that that's the first time he was ever Hayabusa. It wasn't on an FMW show, it was on that legendary J Cup '94. And from there, he goes on to be a big deal in FMW, obviously. When Onita retires for, what would that be, the second time, I guess? Hayabusa is his opponent in the retirement match. And when Onita does retire after that, it is Hayabusa then left as the biggest star. He's anointed the biggest star. But Megumi Kudo kind of organically becomes the biggest star in the company. And then she retires in, what was it, late '97. And then Hayabusa is the biggest star. And then it's the down period, and that's not his fault. New owner, Hiromichi Fuyuki booking, like it's, I don't know if how many people have seen it. It's just wild. It's WWF Vince Russo influenced. It's crazy stuff, and it's pretty bad. There's some good matches, largely involving Hayabusa, Masato Tanaka, Mr. Ganosuke, but it's a rough time, and the company starts to go down over the next few years, and just as the company's really bottoming out, Hayabusa breaks his neck and is paralysed, and that's his career finished. Unfortunately, he passed away a few years ago. He's definitely an interesting case. I would say no, but I wouldn't argue anyone that thinks he should be in, because a lot of people got into Japanese wrestling and different styles of wrestling but through Hayabusa, so I can see it. Personally, I would say no, but there is a case there for sure. Next up, we have Masaki Mochizuki. Anyone listening to this, just go and listen to Open the Voice Gate. Case Lowe and Mike Spears did an episode dedicated to Mochizuki's Hall of Fame candidacy, and they do a better job than I ever could. I watched Dragon Gate. I've watched it since 2010, I would say. And I've gone back and watched, Toriyamon and Dragon Gate pre-2010, obviously. First time I seen Mochizuki was in Ring of Honor, then Dragon Gate USA, of course. He is an excellent, excellent wrestler. I know Case Slow thinks he's one of the 2 or 3 greatest wrestlers of all time. I think Mike has him number 2. I remember Alan Forel saying he had him number 2 or 3 greatest wrestler of all time. I can't go that far. I haven't seen as much Mochizuki as either of those 3 have. I have seen his biggest matches and his most critically acclaimed matches, and I think he's a top 30 for sure. Can I go as low as a top 20? I don't know. But he is an excellent, excellent wrestler, and if you're in anyone's top 30, you have to be considered one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, and a strong case for the Hall of Fame. And the longevity is unbelievable. This guy has been great for at least 25 years, maybe longer. He's slowing down now, but Mochizuki slowing down is better than most people's best. He's one of the best wrestlers in Dragon Gate history. It seems that the voters are more inclined to consider Dragon Gate, which they should. At times it was the number 2, maybe even number 1 promotion in Japan, depending. And Mochizuki was a big part of that. As far as I know, well, my personal favourite year for Dragon Gate is 2011, and that is when Mochizuki is the Open the Dream Gate champion. And I do believe most people would agree 2011 is like the absolute best of Dragon Gate. I wouldn't say he's the best wrestler in Dragon Gate history. I would say that would be Shingo Takagi, but I would have Mochizuki a strong number 2. Shingo's in the Hall of Fame. Shima is in the Hall of Fame. I think it's time for Mochizuki to go into the Hall of Fame. His first year on the ballot. And next year we need to look at getting Naruki Doi and Dragon Kid on there. I'm a big proponent of promotions golden eras being well represented in the Hall of Fame. If you look at 80s, Hogan era WWF, Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, Roddy Piper, Andre the Giant, Paul Orndorff, Vince, obviously, Bobby Heenan. They're all in the Hall of Fame. The recent New Japan boom, Tanahashi, Okada, Nakamura, Omega, AJ, Naito, Ishii, Suzuki, all in the Hall of Fame. And I think Dragon Gate deserves to have the same. And one last thing I will say about Masaaki Mochizuki is that he legitimately has one of the greatest professional wrestling matches of all time under his belt. 2015 against Shingo Takagi. A rare Dragon Gate match that I watched, pretty much in real time. I'm usually quite behind on Dragon Gate. I just cherry pick. But with that, I remember watching it a day or two after it happened and being blown away. It is one of the best matches of all time. He and Shingo were never better than they were on that night. And if anyone hasn't seen that match, do yourself a favour, go check it out. It is just about as good of a professional wrestling match as any there's ever been. Masaaki Mochizuki is, for me, undeniable. He is a Hall of Famer, and he is still just one of the best wrestlers in the world. Even at his age at 55 and slowed down, he isn't what he was even 5-6 years ago. He is still incredible. For the rest of the Japan ballot, I don't have too much to say, but I'll touch on them. Antonio Inoki and Seiji Sakaguchi as a tag team. To be honest, I could go either way. Inoki's obviously already in first ballot, one of the most influential, important, greatest professional wrestlers of all time. Does his team with Sakaguchi warrant another Hall of Fame spot? I could go either way. I don't have strong feelings either way about it. And next we have he's the former IWGP Heavyweight Champion, Zack Sabre Jr. Zack is one of the best wrestlers of the last 20 years, I would say. I say that as someone who isn't necessarily as high on his work as some other people are. But he still is one of the greatest wrestlers of the last 20 years. He's obviously very good. He has a very unique style. But the one thing about his style is that there's no influence. He hasn't influenced anyone else, and he's been at the forefront of pro wrestling really for the last 10, 11 years. Before that, he was based in obviously the UK and Noah, but once he moved to the US in 2014, working PWG, Evolve, then he eventually moved to New Japan from Noah, and he's been at the forefront. No one's really been influenced, but I think Zack Sabre Jr. is almost perfectly built for his style of wrestling. The way, the slender build, the long limbs, it just works for his style of wrestling. He's very unique in every way almost. As great as his work is it Hall of Fame level? This is the most subjective part of the Hall of Fame. I don't know. Would I vote for him? Personally, no. Great, his work's great, but is it Shingo Takagi, Tomohiro Ishii, Masaaki Mochizuki, that level of in-ring work that gets someone into Hall of Fame? Personally, I don't think so. As a draw, he is now a 2-time IWGP Heavyweight Champion. Obviously New Japan's just not doing great altogether, but it probably worked against him as far as a Hall of Fame case. He really hasn't done well at the gate at all, unfortunately. As much as I enjoy Zack, and I really do, I've seen him live so many times. I saw him live last year against Hechicero. Amazing match, one of the best I've ever seen live. I just, at this point, couldn't say he's a Hall of Famer. But again, Zack is in the middle of his run, so maybe there's still time. But we will see about Zack. But at the minute, it would be a no for me. Next is Meiko Satomura. I'll be honest, I have never been a massive Joshi fan. Even the really acclaimed 90s stuff, it's very hit or miss for me. Meiko is someone who I do enjoy when I watch. I think she's great. I'm not a regular, I was never a regular Joshi watcher. I've cherry picked, and what I have seen of Mako I have always very much enjoyed. I like her more than I do Manami Toyota, for instance, or Dynamite Kansai, Kyoko in a way. I like Mako. Probably on the same level I like Bull Nakano, Akira Hokuto, Aja Kong, Devil Masami, Lioness Asuka, Chikusa Nagayo. They're the Joshi wrestlers that I really love, and I'd say I like Mako at that level, but I haven't seen enough. A lot of that has to do with she was probably at her, I can't even say she was at the top of her game, but she was a big star during a darker time of Joshi. It's obviously had a renaissance in the last few years, and she's been in NXT UK and NXT US. It's a no for me, but I can understand people that have watched her a lot more than I have, thinking that she is a Hall of Famer, and I completely get that, but maybe I'm not the most educated on Miyako to comment, but I wanted to mention her because from what I have seen, I do very much enjoy her work. I love her matches with Akira Hokuto and Aja Kong and Io Shirai, but people more educated on Joshi than I would have a better, more well-rounded opinion. But I do like her, but for me, not what I've seen, I couldn't say yes to a Hall of Fame spot. So next on the ballot we have Tiger Jeet Singh. I actually wrote Dave last year asking if he could be put into the Japan category. I think he was in like the rest of the world last year. Tiger Jeet Singh, I think it was Case Low, I want to say it was Case, that said Tiger Jeet Singh is a test to see how bad of a wrestler can you be but a draw and get into the Hall of Fame. He is very bad, there's no doubt about it. He horrible to watch, but you can't deny he was a draw. He drew money. I am someone that I value that a lot. If you can get people to pay to see you wrestle in the numbers that he did, he's doing something right. You can't take that away from him. He's doing his job well. So for me, as bad as a wrestler as he is, you know, as silly as it might sound to say, there is more to it than just your in-ring work. You know, the wrestling. Yes, it is pro wrestling, but it is a business, and he was able to get people out to see him work. So maybe they regretted it when they went after they seen his matches, but I'm a yes on Tiger Jeet Singh, and I always have been. So next is Yoshihiro Takayama. Again, first ballot, my personal Hall of Fame. I love Yoshihiro Takayama. He's had some of the best matches I've ever seen. Some of my favourite matches with Kenta Kobashi and Kensuke Sasaki, Kenta. He's had some great tags. But is he a Wrestling Observer Hall of Famer? He was a big deal for a while, between pro wrestling and MMA, say 02 to 04. He was a great wrestler, say from 99 through quite late, like maybe the early 10s, very early 10s. There's a Kenta match from 2011 I really like, so he was very good for a long time. It might be like Bullet Bob, or this is a Heart Rules My Head, so I don't know. I would love him to be in, but I really don't know. But I do love the guy, so, and as a person, how strong he is, you know, God bless Yoshihiro Takayama, so I'd love to see him get in personally. And lastly, in the Japan category, is the team of Manami Toyota and Toshio Yamada. Manami Toyota is already in as a singles. Are they enough? Is there enough there as a team for them to go in? I don't think so. They are a very good team. They've had some excellent matches. Better opponents, I think. But I can't say there's enough there, with considering Manami Toyota is already in as a singles as she should be. So that would be a no from me, although they are a very good tag team. This is starting to go quite long, so I'm gonna go through the next three categories pretty quick. I don't have too much to say, I don't think, so we'll start off with Mexico, and in this category you can vote for up to three candidates. So on the ballot are Angel Blanco and Dr. Wagner, Sangre Chicana, El Dandy, Dorel Dixon, Gran Hamada, Los Infernales of El Satanico, Perita Morgan and MS Uno, Elio del Santo and Octagon, La Parca AAA, Masquerada Sagrada, and Volador Jr. I won't touch on everyone in this section. I will say El Dandy is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, and more people need to watch El Dandy. Watch his matches with Negro Casas. He is just an amazing wrestler. I think he should be in the Hall of Fame. I think Gran Hamada should be in the Hall of Fame. I think Los Infernales should be in the Hall of Fame. Volador Jr. is obviously still wrestling at a high level, and with this current CMLL boom, I think he's still building his Hall of Fame case. Sangre Chicana, I need to research more. Same with Angel Blanco and Dr. Wagner. Someone that I do want to touch on here is Dorel Dixon. I want to say yes, but a lot of why I think he should be in is US based. If you look, he was challenging Lou Thesz for the world title. He challenged Buddy Rogers for the world title. He drew great houses. I think what he drew with Buddy Rogers, something like 15,000. But that's in the US, and he's in the Mexico category, so I need to research how he drew in Mexico. But Dorel Dixon, I think, is a very strong candidate. I wouldn't have the information on hand enough to vote for him myself, but all signs are pointing towards that it is there. I just haven't discovered it yet, so I think it would be a yes, and I would very much like him to go in this year. With Mexico, the backlog was cleared a few years ago. There were so many people that needed to go in, and thankfully they did. So it's a lot more open now, and there's as many surefire Hall of Famers in that category as there was in years past. So next we have basically the rest of the world section: Europe, Australia, New Zealand, Pacific Islands, and Africa. And in this category you can vote for three candidates. So on the ballot we have Spiros Arion, Dominic DeNucci, George Gordienko, Steve Gray, Billy Joyce, Les Kellett, Killer Carl Cox, Gilbert Leduc, Ted Boy Marino, the Royal Brothers of Bert Royal and Vic Faulkner, Jose Torres, and Otto Fons. To be honest, if I did have a ballot, I would abstain from this category because I don't know enough about every candidate, and I would be doing them a disservice by voting for other people on the category. Spiros Arion, I wrote Dave in the same email I wrote about Yoshiaki Fujiwara. I also said to Dave about how strong of a candidate I think Spiros Arion is. Again, unfortunately, a lot of it is based on the US. His feud with Bruno Sammartino is so good. And it drew 3 matches, drew 22,000 each time in the Garden. 3 matches at the Garden with Bruno, most people only got 2, he got 3, which is very impressive that the third match did so well, considering he lost the second match decisively. But that feud was hot, and they were able to get a third match out of it, drawing 22,000. And according to I'm just reading my email here, if you can tell I'm reading. According to Australian historian Ed Locke, he was drawing houses in Sydney, which averaged around 9,000 people. It's a strong case. If you consider US and Australia, I think he's a lock. If because he's in the Australia category you're only going to focus on that, there's still a case there, and he's someone that I personally would like to see go in. George Gordienko, I think, is very strong. I read the biography on him, very good. I don't think he would have done well in past years because he was pretty much blacklisted from wrestling because people thought he was a communist, and I think a lot of the older voters wouldn't have voted for him for that, which I think a lot of them would have died out at this point, to be honest. But do newer voters who wouldn't hold that against him maybe as much, do they know as much about George Gordienko to vote for him either way? I don't know. He's definitely an interesting case. Everyone else, I can't really comment too much on. Killer Carl Cox, I don't know if he's in the right section to do himself the best justice, really. Jose Torres, I researched last year and I was very impressed with what I seen, but is it enough for me to say that I would be able to vote for him? I'm not sure. Otto Vaughn's, I think, is significant enough just from the amount of people he helped develop in Europe. People from the US and Japan would come over, they would work Germany and Austria, and they would become such more well-rounded wrestlers. And that's not the say, Otto Vaughn's himself, AWA World Champion, big star, mainstream star, and ripping the phone books and all that. I think Otto's a pretty strong candidate, and I'd like to see him get in. But as I say, I wouldn't know much about all the rest of the candidates to really vote on it, so it'll be interesting to see who goes through in this candidate, if anyone. And lastly, we have the non-wrestlers, and in this category you can vote for up to 7 candidates. So we have Dave Brown, Zane Breslov, Bobby Bruns, Bob Caudle, Joe Higuchi, Jim Johnson, Larry Matisic, James Melby, Bill Mercer, Gorilla Monsoon, Rossi Ogawa, Reggie Parks, Morris Siegel, Tony Schiavone, George Scott, Kevin Sullivan, Mike Tenay, Ted Turner, Jesse Ventura, Roy Welch, Stanley Weston, the Grand Wizard, and Koichi Yoshizawa. I think that this is quite a stacked portion of the ballot. There's several people that I think should be in from this section. I will run through them. Dave Brown, I think, should be in. If you talk to Memphis fans who were there at the time, it wasn't Lance Russell and his sidekick Dave Brown, it was Lance and Dave. They were equals. They're probably the greatest announced team of all time. Lance Russell is the greatest wrestling announcer of all time, for sure, in my opinion. Well, alongside with Jim Ross. They're pretty equal. But Dave Brown and Lance are probably the greatest team of all time. And I think he should be in. He's such a part. He's an institution in Memphis. The weatherman. A legend. I think he should be in. Zane Breslov, tough one to vote for. Obviously, great promoter with the WWF and then WCW. He definitely helped WCW turn around in the mid-90s. Can you vote for... So, Zane Breslov and Reggie Parks and Jim Johnson are strange ones because they're 3 people like behind the scenes that did their job very well. Is that enough to get you in a Hall of Fame? I don't know. Jim Johnson, you can make the case. The CDs sold that well for a while, but I don't know if I could vote for any of them, as much as they are obviously fantastic at their jobs. Reggie Parks made some amazing belts that people adore and buy replicas of and spend a fortune on, but personally I don't know if I could vote for those candidates. Bobby Bruns should absolutely be in. Very historically significant in the creation and development of pro wrestling in Japan. Bob Caudle, I don't think he's a slam dunk, but personally he's one of my favourite announcers of all time, and I would love to see him be in. Joe Higuchi, don't know if I could vote for Joe Higuchi. Larry Matisic, he was one of the best announcers in wrestling in the 70s, up there with Lance and Gordon Solie. And if you consider his work as a historian, how many fans he educated through his appearances on Observer Live, Observer Radio, on Wrestling Classics and other forums, there's a case there. There absolutely is. James Melby, kind of on the fence about. Bill Mercer. I like Bill Mercer. Not the best announcer, but he's a very good host. I like Bill Mercer, but I could go either way. Gorilla Monsoon, for sure, historically significant. I haven't got Brian Solomon's book yet. It hasn't released in the UK for another 2-3 weeks, so I will be getting it. It's pre-ordered. I'm not sure. I'm on the fence about Gorilla. Rusty Wakawa, fraudulent candidate. Morris Siegel should absolutely be in. He invented territory wrestling, basically. I can't believe Dave hasn't put him to the historical panel yet. I think it's crazy that he's not in. Again, should have went in the first class, in my opinion, with Bill Curry. Tony Schiavone, I'm very biased. He's one of my favourite announcers of all time. His voice, when he came back to wrestling in 2017, I think, with MLW, hearing his voice again was just so much nostalgia. I still love hearing his voice, but I know I'm biased, so I don't know. George Scott, like Ole Anderson, equally a great booker and a horrible booker, depends on what era you look at. His first run in Mid-Atlantic, obviously very successful. His run to WWF, I very much enjoy it. I like that he's pushing, Ricky Steamboat and Greg Valentine. I would call it a success. And then he went to World Class, and it was a disaster. He went back to WCW, and that was a complete disaster. He didn't last long at all, and then he was South Atlantic, Nelson Royal, he was their booker, and it never really did much. It was only ran for about a year or two. I could go either way on George Scott. Kevin Sullivan, I think, should be in. So as he's in the non-wrestler category, you can only really consider him as a booker. He pretty much invented modern TV wrestling, as much as it's wrote and played out now. He is the booker for Nitro in 1995, 1996, 1997. There's too much influence there. We're still seeing Kevin Sullivan's fingerprints all over professional wrestling today. I think he should be in. Mike Tenay, Garrett Kidney makes the best points for Mike Tenay to be in the Hall of Fame. He will fight his corner completely. I can't do it any better than he did. I love Mike Tenay. If you consider him as a historian, like Larry Matysik, I can see a real case. But I can't do his case justice like Garrett Kidney did. Ted Turner, I think, has to be in. Without Ted Turner, there's a monopoly on professional wrestling in the US in 1988. Even though he may have only thought about wrestling for 2 minutes a year for the next 12, 13 years, he's far too important for keeping Crockett alive and forming WCW. He has to be in. Jesse Ventura, I actually wrote Dave last year asking for Jesse Ventura to go on the ballot. I'm sure I had nothing to do with him going back on it, because I also asked for Ken Shamrock, and he's not here. I think Jesse should be in. The best heel announcer of all time, because he played it almost straight. He would give baby faces credit where it was due. He wasn't overtly heelish. He was just excellent heel announcer. And then obviously his mainstream, doing movies with Arnold Schwarzenegger, becoming the governor. He has reality shows and conspiracy shows. Whatever you may think about it, he is a mainstream star, and I think he should be in. Roy Welch should be in again. Should have went to the historical panel at this point, but what can you do? Stanley Weston, I'm on the fence about. I could go either way. The Grand Wizard, I think I'm higher on the Grand Wizard than just about anyone for the Hall of Fame. So the other two wise men are in, Lou Albano and Fred Blassie. Obviously Fred Blassie, his fantastic wrestling career got him in, not his run as manager really, but I think the Grand Wizard should be in. He managed the great workers, really. He managed Pat Patterson and Don Morocco, and did he manage Ivan Koloff when he came back? I think so, 82-ish. So the Ken Patera, did I already say Sergeant Slaughter? The Great Workers went with the Grand Wizard. The Monsters, the Foreign Heels went with Freddie Blassie. The tag teams went with Lou Albano. That was generally the pattern. And he drew. He helped draw. He was doing the promos with the guys. He managed. He was the booker in Stampede during a pretty strong period for them. I think the Grand Wizard's a pretty strong candidate. I would love to see him go in. And Koichi Yoshizawa, a very interesting candidate. We probably don't know, not probably, we definitely don't know as much about wrestling in Japan as we do without him. All his work in sending over magazines and information over to the US, he is probably too important to not go in. And I actually think there's a very good chance he goes in this year. So if I were to pick 7 candidates from the non-wrestler category that I would vote for personally, I would be voting for Dave Brown, Bobby Bruns, Morris Siegel, Kevin Sullivan, Ted Turner, Jesse Ventura, and the Grand Wizard. I know I said Koichi and Roy Welch should be in. I believe that. Yeah, I'm sticking with what I said. Yeah, any of those. I picked my 7 there. There was another 2, so any of those 9 I think are very, very strong candidates. I'd love to see them all go in at some point. I hope they do, but I think they would be the 7 that I personally would vote for if I were to vote this year. And with that, we have come to the end of the Observer Hall of Fame ballot for 2025. Hopefully my first wrestling audio went okay. It wasn't dull as dishwater, and a few people have at least made it to the end. I want at least 100 people to listen to this, just to make buying the mic worth it. 100 people, that's what I'm shooting for. Before I wrap up, just want to give some plugs. Everyone, if you've made it this far, please go listen if you haven't already. David Bixens's band and John Pollock's Hall of Fame audio. That's on the Between the Sheets feed. Voices of Wrestling, they have 2 shows up at the minute. Joe Gagney discussing modern US and Canada, I think, and Ethan Tyler discussing Japan. Go check those out. They'll be putting out some more episodes covering the other categories. Go listen to Case Lowe and Mike Spears Open the Voice Gate, where they discuss the career of Masaki Mochizuki and why he should be in the Hall of Fame. I think that's all I've listened to so far this year. Definitely check those out if you can. And yeah, if you can't tell, I don't know how to wrap this up, and I'm trying to think right now. So how about I just say thanks for listening, and maybe I'll do another one of these next year, and hopefully have a guest on. So thanks for listening.